From awaytogarden.com and robinhoodradio.com, this is A Way to Garden with Margaret Roach, your weekly invitation to dig in and grow.
I don't know about you, but I'm drawn to ferns, to their primitive flowerless beauty, their diversity of foliar textures and shades of greenness, to their range of sizes from tiny to towering. And I want to invite some to come live with me and my begonias and Clivias and other houseplants, but which ones will be the best match for our house, I wonder? Maidenhair or staghorn or bird's nest or... So today's guest is author of The Complete Book of Ferns, a new book on ferns both indoors and out, and she'll answer that question and more. But first, this message.
Underwriting support from Timber Press, your go-to resource for books in gardening and nature. Whether you're a new gardener, a professional at the top of your field, or a reader interested in the wonders of the natural world, their books are there to help you grow. timberpress.com.
Mobee Weinstein is foreman of gardeners for outdoor gardens at York Botanical Garden in New York City. She's taught classes in indoor plants at the State University of New York and at New York Botanical Garden. And she is also the person who first introduced me to many of what have become my favorite houseplants back when I was a beginning garden writer. And I'd visit her in the NYBG greenhouses while working on a story, some really special times. So welcome, Mobee. So good to have you and think of some of the fun times we've had before.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you. And you?
Good, good. So many plants I associate with you. It's funny, from classes and from interviews and so forth. So anyway, the new book, is called The Complete Book of Ferns, and it is from their history and sort of biology and care and varieties for both indoors and out. But this being winter, I thought we'd sort of do an indoor-focused segment. But first, let's start with a definition. What do I have to do to be a fern? What's a fern?
Well, so ferns are plants, of course.
Good, you got that answer right. Good.
Right. But most people would think that if something is delicate and lacy, they think, oh, that's a fern. For example, asparagus fern, which is not a fern at all.
Right.
And actually an asparagus. But what, by definition, a fern is a plant that is vascular. In other words, it has a system. It's kind of like our veins and arteries. It has a pumping system through the plant. They also have leaves, but in particular, we call these leaves megaphylls. That's the technical term. And it really just means that they have branching veins. And it allows them to get much larger, having a branched vein system. And then they reproduce by spore, not by seed.
Right.
So that's what makes a fern a fern.
Okay.
And it really has nothing to do with how it looks to us superficially.
Yeah, and they do look quite different. I mean, in the book, that was one of the most fun, kind of looking through the glossary of the indoor and then the outdoor varieties that you recommend. I mean, the diversity is quite startling, really.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Most people think of them as very delicate and lacy and always in kind of moist tropical woods or even temperate, forests. But most people don't realize they can be very large or very leathery or completely undissected or undivided in strap shape, and they can grow in deserts and they can grow in water. And people just don't realize how diverse they are.
It's funny that you say water, because one fern that I grow every year, I actually order it, mail order, to put on the top of my 2 in-ground water gardens to kind of shade the water and keep, green algae from growing, string algae from forming and so forth, deprive the light of water, the water of light. And one or the other, Mobee, I'm not really sure. And it's just so beautiful. I say Azolla or Azolla. I'm not sure. Azolla, Azolla. And I just love it, and it's velvety, and it sort of sometimes picks up a reddish cast at certain times of year and certain amounts of light, I guess. Yeah, and it's just beautiful. It's like a velvet carpet or something on the surface of the water, and it's a fern. It's crazy.
It is a fern, and most people would never look at that and think they're looking at a fern. Even if you look at it close up, you still wouldn't think it's a fern.
Yeah.
But it is, and it's rather small, but it just divides and grows so rapidly that it can actually smother water surfaces.
Yeah.
So in tropical areas, it's considered quite aggressive, but they've used it. Well, people learned a long time ago that it helped the rice grow. We now know that it's because it has a special symbiotic relationship. When I first learned it, they said it was a blue-green algae. Now it's classified as a cyanobacterium, but it's the same organism. Huh. And it fixes nitrogen, so it really helps the yield of the rice crops.
Oh, wow.
So it's actually a very important plant for some very important food production. And it's a little fern.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful in like a dish garden even, a little
yep,
water dish
a little
garden.
bowl, just a little bowl of water with some azolla floating in it. They call it mosquito fern because, just as you were saying, you might use it to block the sun out of the water to reduce algae from growing. Because it smothers the surface, it can kind of make it more difficult for mosquitoes to breed in the water.
Right.
They like open sitting water, so...
Yeah. Yeah, so ferns for deserts, ferns for water, ferns for lots of different habitats, including our houses.
Exactly.
So they're not one size fits all, and of course our indoor environments aren't sort of homogeneous either. No two places inside a house, light exposure or temperature or whatever, and no two houses. So I don't know how could we kind of do this? Do we talk about plants by the types of exposure and conditions they like, or how do you want to introduce us to some of your favorites, or some that you want to recommend that we give a look to? How do you want to group them?
There isn't one way that it could only be done, but I like to, and this also goes for outdoors. Anytime you want to grow a plant, but indoors it can often be much more challenging. I like to first look at your setting. Mm-hmm. To see what you have, because it's human nature to go and buy a plant because you like it, and then you come home and find out you have no place for it, or you don't have any right conditions for it. We all do it. We do it again and again and again. Yeah. But if you can avoid that, you'll have much better luck. So if you look and you say, okay, I have an east-facing window, you could grow almost any indoor fern from the light needs. Mm-hmm. Then you have to look at your temperature. How warm or how cool. Most indoors are not freezing,
right,
or where people are living, but some people do definitely turn their heat down or have rooms or sections of their homes which are cooler, and that could actually be helpful. But mostly we'd say they're at least 60, but 70, 65, 70 degrees, at least in wintertime. And in summertime, if you don't have air conditioning, it's much more. Mm-hmm. I know my apartment can get up to 90 or more in the hot summer days when the AC is off.
Right. And I have two mudrooms off, little mudrooms off the house, and some people might have like a sunroom, a porch that's enclosed, and maybe they don't go out there and sit all day in the winter, but it is still an environment that might suit some types of plants and not others, and so you really have to evaluate each spot. So east window is a good one. What about so not the brighter light windows?
Well, so east would be, in my opinion, kind of our second lightest. North is the lowest.
Okay.
And some people will say you can grow many ferns in north light. I actually have east and south, but my south is not really usable, so most of my plants in my apartment are east-facing. Uh-huh. And that is working beautifully for a lot of these. Of course, I wouldn't grow some other plants that need a lot of sun to bloom, etc.
Right.
But all the plants I have can take the east light fabulously. Okay. And I winter over limes and things like that in the east light. So that's pretty good. West can be okay for a lot of the ferns, but especially in summer, it can get a little too hot.
Yes.
So you just have to be careful. And south is the same thing. South is the most light, the strongest light. But again, in the summer, it could be way too strong and way too hot for most of the ferns. So you'd either back them away from the window or have a sheer curtain or something, or you could move them to the south exposure in the wintertime to get more light if you felt that worked for you.
Right. But, and my houseplants all get evicted and go out into the garden in the summer. So
right. I have a small terrace,
I know.
So they don't all go out there, but some of them do.
Yeah.
And then they're much happier, but they're still facing east. They're just outside. But that's an enormous difference, as you know.
Yes.
Just moving inside the window changes a lot.
Yeah. And then I would imagine that like scale, like how big, I mean, some plants don't suit us because we don't have enough room. You know what I mean? Sometimes we need something that's more miniature-ish compared to a big thing. I mean, that's the other thing I think to consider is how big it. Maybe we're buying it in a 3-inch pot if we're mail ordering it, but it's not necessarily going to stay that size. So I guess we need to know that too, don't we?
Right. So, I mean, there are some really large ones which are great for atria or indoor landscapes, or if you happen to have that kind of space in your home. You could get a tree fern. Even if it was small, it could get larger for you. Or you could grow some really big baskets of staghorn ferns or some of the other basket ferns. Mm-hmm. But they might not start out that big, but ultimately they could get that big for you, and you would want a big piece. But a lot of us don't have quite that room, so there are some that can be really happy in a 4 or 6-inch pot for basically their whole life, other than occasional repotting or refreshing. But they wouldn't need a bigger space. So that's also helpful for a lot of home gardeners.
Yeah. Now, can you tell, you've been around plants your whole adult life. You know a lot about plants. You probably can hear what they're saying. But can you tell maybe by looking at an assortment of ferns, you know, what conditions they're for? In other words, like some have almost like a plasticky, thick strap, like you mentioned, leaves, like the bird's nest, the aspleniums, you know, versus the delicate, feathery, tiny little leaflets of maidenhair. Can you infer from that what kind? Does that give you any clues as an expert? Or
it definitely gives us all clues.
Okay.
You can't always be 100% certain unless you know what the plant is. Yeah. But in general, from its texture, you can tell that it should be able to tolerate less humidity or that it would need more humidity.
Okay.
So a maidenhair, which is one of the most popular because they have some of the most delicate, finely cut foliage, and they come in all kinds, there's hundreds of varieties of them. They have very small leaflets, a lot of those, and very, very thin in texture.
Yes.
When you see something like that, it's telling you, I generally need a lot of humidity because I'm not protected from drying out. Mm. Whereas when you see like a thick bird's nest frond or the crocodile fern frond that are thicker and, like you said, almost plastic or leathery, and they have that, kind of structure and texture, that thick texture to them, those are generally going to be much more tolerant of dry air because they're not so exposed. They already have a thick coating on them and a thick texture to them to help protect them.
Right. Did I say the wrong genus when I just said bird's nest, or did I say the right thing? What are the birds? Are the bird's nest asplenium? Did I make that?
Yes.
They are.
Yes.
And what are the maidenhairs? They're in which
Maidenhairs are adiantum.
Adiantum, right, of course. Adiantum. Okay, adiantum. Okay. Oh, so you can infer. Okay, because I kind of think that about plants in general, but I didn't know. So we're going to really, if we wanted to have the best shot at success, we're going to do a little analysis of the conditions first and the space and so forth. And then we're going to go plant shopping. Are there some, if I want to get started with some ferns, are there some that you feel that are not only beautiful but are really doers, that you would like to see people try and have success with, or some that you wouldn't be without? Yeah,
there definitely are, and there are certainly quite a number of them. It's not limited to one or two. Ferns can be finicky, and they can sometimes get a bad reputation because if you get a maidenhair and you don't know how to take care of it and it dries and dies on you, then you think, well, ferns are like that, and they're not. So there's quite a number of them. I have a lot of favorites, of course. I like all ferns.
Yes.
And some are much easier to get and some are a little harder to get. But there is a type of bird's nest, which is, the common name is Japanese bird's nest, and it's Asplenium antiquum. But that species is smaller and narrower leaves and can be kind of containerized and kept more compact, easier, and for longer times. Mm-hmm. And I find it to be really one of the best and really handsome. And there are varieties that have very crested tips. There's one that's really crested. It's called Leslie. And there's one that's lightly crested, and it's called Chrissy. So you could get a kind of plain strap leaf, or one that's just very wavy on the edges, or ones that have these great cresting, and they're really pretty tough.
Okay.
I like them a lot.
So the Japanese bird's nest.
Yeah,
okay.
go ahead.
No, Japanese bird's nest and its
Right.
varieties. Okay.
Right. Also, what a lot of people just call Boston fern, that's actually a species whose botanical name is Nephrolepis exaltata, and those are pretty good for the home. I actually have a big one of those, which is a variety called Tiger, which has nice striping in it.
Oh.
And that's one of my favorites, as well as some of the miniatures, but those can be a little trickier. But there's a closely related species that's Nephrolepis cordifolia, and its common name is tuber fern or tuber sword fern. It makes little tubers in the soil along the stolons and stuff that run through the soil. So that one is really durable. It's upright. It's handsome. It's very common as a landscape plant in any tropical or subtropical area, but it makes a great indoor fern as well. It's just really tough. And there's a very popular variety of it that's smaller, and that's lemon buttons.
Okay.
And that's one of my favorites.
Okay.
And that is really easy.
Okay. Huh, and these are very different looking, I'm imagining.
Yeah,
these are all very different
which also gives you nice, actually, I like to mix them together, too, in dish gardens because they have great combination. They make a great combination, for interest.
Right.
So those are some of my real top favorites.
Okay.
But there's, I could probably rattle off a dozen or so, depending on how many you want to hear about.
Well, tell us a couple.
Or how much time you have.
Yeah, tell us a couple more that are on your top list, and then we're going to talk about some cultural stuff and so forth. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a general group. They're botanically called terrace, and there's a P in front of the T there.
Right.
It's silent. And terrace is actually Greek for fern. And these are called brake ferns.
Right. Brake?
Right.
Okay.
And there's a number of different species, but there are a few that are really common. And the Cretan brake fern is probably the most common with the most varieties. And those all grow nicely. So some of them are variegated, some of them are more finely cut. They're interesting. And then there's two other species. One is Nipponica, which is one of the most common, and it's got a nice creamy white variegation on it. So it's very, very popular. It's often mislabeled or identified as a Terrace cretica albolineata, but it's not that. But if you see that name, it's probably that fern just incorrectly labeled. Mm-hmm. And then one that's silvery, much more silvery than creamy white, and those are either silver lace fern by common name or the Victorian lace fern. Those are Terrace ensiformis, and they're just two different cultivars, and they look very similar, but they have a nice silvery combination with the green. So you can get some really nice coloring going in there and texture, and those are really pretty tough.
Okay.
So that's another top one.
Okay.
The rabbit's foot group,
yes.
Those are nice, and they're fun, and they're pretty easy, and they have nice creeping rhizomes. So one has more of a whitish rhizome, and that's the white rabbit's foot. You'll get lots of common names on these, so it's not always easy to do it by common name.
Right.
And then another one that's often called rabbit's foot or squirrel's foot, and that has more of a brown rhizome. Mm-hmm. And it's their fuzzy rhizomes.
There's a great picture in the book. I remember one, particularly a really fuzzy one. Yeah. We'll show that with the transcript. Maybe that's a funny. It is. It looks like an animal.
You do. You want to pet it. You totally want to pet it, and you can't think this is a plant.
Yeah.
Looks more like some creature.
Yeah. So I love in the book how you took the time to really explain things that might sound simple, but are kind of off-putting especially to the beginner who's adopted a plant and doesn't want to harm it, doesn't want it to die, and stuff like watering, because it confounds people. How much, how often, applied how, if it's in a pot, do I dunk the pot, do I pour water through it, how often, and if it's mounted on a board. So basics, a real quick sort of minute course in watering. I mean, is there general wisdom?
Well, it's the same. Probably, if you had to limit it, would be the most single important factor.
Yes.
And most plants are killed due to watering, either overwatering, which is usually what people do indoors or with containers, or underwatering, which they often do outside. So, but overwatering is clearly our biggest problem. It's hard for every plant has a different need to begin with, so that's why you want to know what your plant is and try and find out what does it like to begin with. And then you have to look at your soil, your container. What time of year is it? Is the plant in a resting phase, or should it be actively growing?
Yes.
How much sun is it getting, or light? How warm is it? How dry is it? So those are already confounding for a lot of people who don't have experience. And so you want to just at least start to be aware of these things, and then you have to start checking the water. So the idea is not to water a little bit every day. You want to water thoroughly and then wait. So you can always check the soil surface with your finger to see if it's moist or wet or very dry. If it's a plant that you have every day or in your house every day, you can start to also pick it up and get a feel for how heavy it is when it's wet, because you've just watered it and you know that it's soaking wet, or how light it is when it's dry, and you pick it up and you say, uh-oh.
I went too far.
I better get this some water right away.
Yeah.
No wonder it's starting to wilt,
Yeah.
So checking the soil, of course, is best, but feeling, looking for the weight, or sometimes with clay pots you can tap on them and see if they're moist or wet. But the best is to really touch the soil and then get a feel for how heavy it might be. And then water it thoroughly. That's why you want drainage holes, so the excess can come out. And if you have a saucer underneath, which is usually nice, if the water sits in there for half an hour or an hour, probably time to dump it out.
Okay.
So it doesn't sit waterlogged.
Right. So let the soil really percolate up some of that moisture. But,
exactly.
But then don't let it stand in it for a day or two or 3 or 4. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Unless it's an aquatic, then that's what you'd want to do.
Yeah. So, I looked at the book and I'm like going through the pages and I want all the ferns, and some of them I don't know where I'm going to get them. And the local garden center in my area has more and more houseplants, because houseplants are kind of a thing again.
Exactly.
They're coming around the mountain again, which is great. And so I'm seeing more diversity than I used to, but still, are there other, like Logies.com, for instance, is one place I know that you can order things. Are there places that you know of where people should be looking for?
There are a
ferns?
few.
Yeah.
And I know that on eBay and other places they're selling them. I just haven't bought from them, so I don't know who I could recommend. But I know if you start searching sites like that, you'll find stuff, and maybe then you can see if people are saying they have good recommendations. But Fancy Franz, which is out in Washington, which is Hughes Jones's nursery, is a great mail order. Hers tend to be more temperate outdoor plants, but she does have some that are perfectly at home indoors.
Yes.
And she's certainly very knowledgeable and reputable, a wonderful person. So that's one potential. For more tropical ones that you would grow indoors or only outside if you were in the tropics, there's Glasshouse Works.
Yes, Glasshouse
Works. Which is in
Works.
Stewart, Ohio.
Yes, of course. Oh, yeah. Oh, good, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And typically they're going to send you very small stuff.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
Yeah.
All mail order is pretty much small.
Yeah.
Logies is a fabulous place, and they do mail order, and I go there, but they don't have very many ferns.
No, just
They're
a few.
Very limited on ferns. Staghorns they seem to sell, but unfortunately, I wish they would grow more ferns. I'd like more sources for it.
Well, I wish we had more time, too. I would throw in Plant Delights, which has a big collection of ferns.
That was the last one I was going to add.
Yeah.
Because they overlap.
Good. So thank you so much, and I hope you'll come back and talk about outdoor ferns when we're a little closer to spring, Mobee. And thank you. The book
I would love to.
The Complete Book of Ferns, and we'll talk again soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Underwriting support from Timber Press, your go-to resource for books in gardening and nature. Whether you're a new gardener, a professional at the top of your field, or a reader interested in the wonders of the natural world, their books are there to help you grow. timberpress.com.
And thanks to all of you for tuning in. Now, don't miss an episode. You can subscribe free to the podcast version of the show on Stitcher or iTunes or Spotify. And you can find me anytime at awaytogarden.com or on Facebook and Instagram as @awaytogarden. And happy gardening meantime.
A Way to Garden with Margaret Roach is a joint production of awaytogarden.com and the smallest NPR station in the nation, Robin Hood Radio.